I never wanted the night shift, but after my last hospital contract ended in a mess, an overdose I didn't cause, and a supervisor who turned her back, I didn't have many options. So when I got a call offering double pay at Hollow Creek Regional Hospital, a small, isolated facility in West Texas, I said yes, even though something about the woman's voice on the other end of the phone made my skin crawl. The hospital was an old two-story brick structure that looked like it had been dragged out of a forgotten century. Rust had begun to creep over the emergency exit doors, and the lights outside flickered in a slow, ominous rhythm as I pulled into the parking lot. My phone had no service. The street was empty. The only sound was the slow creak of the hospital sign swinging in the wind. I killed the engine and stared up at the building for a long minute, heart thudding heavier than it should. I'm not the superstitious type, but something about the place felt wrong. Still, bills don't pay themselves. Inside, the place was dim. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, some of them out completely. The lobby was small, with a front desk that had clearly seen better days. A heavy silence hung over everything, like the walls were holding their breath. An older nurse in blue scrubs was waiting for me. She had pale skin, silver-streaked hair tied in a bun, and eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in hours. "You must be Marla," she said, though I hadn't given my name. "Yeah, just got in." "I'm Nurse Karen. I handle orientation for new night staff." She gestured for me to follow her. "Come with me. There are some things you need to know." As we walked down a long hallway, I tried to make small talk, but she ignored my questions. Instead, she handed me a clipboard with a single sheet of paper. Night shift rules, Hollow Creek Regional Hospital. 1. Always clock in at exactly 7 p.m., no earlier, no later. 2. Never enter room 209. Do not speak to anyone who asks you to open it. 3. If you hear a lullaby playing between 2 and 3 a.m., do not investigate. 4. You must feed the man in room B13 every night at midnight. Use only the tray marked with a black X. 5. If a patient claims to see the woman in white, immediately sedate and restrain them. 6. At 3:33 a.m., you will hear a knock at the emergency exit. Do not respond. Do not look. Do not speak. 7. Before sunrise, return all hallway mirrors to the supply closet on floor 2. At first, I thought it was a joke, but Karen's expression stayed stone cold as I skimmed the list. "You're serious?" "I suggest you take them seriously," she replied, her voice flat. "We lost the last nurse who didn't." "Lost? As in?" She didn't answer. The shift began normally enough. I got a quick rundown of the active patients, only 6 in the long-term care wing and 2 in post-op. My duties were minimal: check vitals, administer meds, and document everything by hand. No electronic charts here. I was the only nurse scheduled, with one security guard patrolling the grounds. Karen left me with a last warning. "Don't forget Rule 1, she said. If you clock in even a minute late, you're not protected." I checked my watch. 6:58 p.m. I swiped in at the old punch clock exactly on time. A cold wind seemed to move through the hallway even though no doors were open. The first hour passed uneventfully. I visited the patients, jotted down their vitals, administered scheduled meds. Most of them were asleep. A few were lucid, but too tired to talk. An elderly man in room 203, Mr. Gaines, asked me for water, then pulled me close. "Watch the corners," he whispered. "She hides there." I tried to ask what he meant, but he had already turned away, pulling the covers over his head like a child afraid of the dark. By 10 p.m., the hospital silence was starting to press on me. Every little creak echoed like a scream. I walked the halls just to keep my legs moving, flashlight in hand, even though the power was technically working. Then I passed room 209. The door was shut tight, the plaque outside rusted and faded. I wouldn't have noticed anything if not for the sound. Something like soft breathing coming from the other side. A woman's voice murmured my name. I backed away quickly, heart racing. Nope, I didn't go in. At 11:45, I went to prep the meal tray for room B13. I had to dig through the fridge until I found the one marked with a black X. It looked normal enough. Mashed potatoes, chicken breasts, some kind of soup. But the smell was off. Not rotten, just metallic, like old pennies. B13 was in the basement. The door was a heavy iron slab with a viewing slot, like something out of a prison. I knocked once. No response. I opened the slot and saw a figure sitting perfectly still in the shadows. "Your dinner," I said. The figure didn't move. I slid the tray inside on a small cart and pulled the door shut immediately. As I turned away, I heard him whisper, "Don't forget the mirrors." At midnight, I sat at the nurse's station trying to distract myself with paperwork. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The rules ran over and over in my head like a chant. At 2:16 a.m., a soft lullaby began to play. It came from the hallway behind me. I didn't move. I sat frozen for an entire hour as the music drifted in and out, distant and haunting like it was being played on a broken music box. I covered my ears, squeezed my eyes shut, and whispered prayers I hadn't said in years. At 3:33 a.m., the knock came. 3 soft taps on the emergency exit. Then silence. Then the sound of someone breathing, just on the other side of the door. My body trembled with fear. I didn't move. I didn't even look toward the hallway. At 4 a.m., the breathing stopped. By 5:30 a.m., my shift was almost over. I remembered Rule 7 and began collecting the mirrors. There were small standing mirrors placed along the hallway corners and patient rooms on the second floor. I hadn't noticed them before. As I gathered them, I saw something strange in the reflection of the third one. A woman in a white gown standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I finished collecting the last mirror and returned them all to the locked supply closet. My fingers were so cold I could barely turn the key. By 6:45 a.m., I was back at the nurse's station, staring blankly at the wall clock. When the hour struck 7, I bolted to the punch clock and swiped out. Karen was waiting for me in the lobby. "You made it," she said, almost surprised. Most don't. "What the hell is this place?" I whispered. Her eyes were sad. "It's Hollow Creek, and this hospital feeds on rules." I walked out into the morning sunlight, feeling like I had just escaped a nightmare. But as I reached my car, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. A woman in white, standing at the hospital door, smiling, waiting for me to return. I told myself I wasn't going back. After my first shift, I drove straight home, locked all the doors, and buried the list of rules under a pile of laundry. I spent the day in bed with the lights on, trying to convince myself it was all a strange dream. Hallucinations from fatigue, maybe. Mass hysteria. Sleep deprivation. But when I checked my phone, there were 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemail, just silence. Then a 4th call. This time, a text followed. "You forgot something. Return before nightfall." Attached was a photo. My name badge. The one I swore I had clipped onto my uniform when I left. It was sitting on the front desk of the hospital. I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend it didn't matter. But around 5:30 p.m., the air in my apartment turned heavy and cold. Every shadow stretched longer than it should have. My own reflection began to lag just slightly behind my movements in every mirror. By 6 p.m., I was back in my car, driving down the same dirt road toward Hollow Creek Regional Hospital. It looked the same. Still flickering lights. Still the rusted sign creaking in the wind. Still wrong. I entered with just minutes to spare. My badge was sitting neatly on the front desk, as promised. Beneath it was another sheet of paper. Updated protocol, second night shift. 1. The rules remain. Follow them without deviation. 2. If room 209 knocks, reply with "all is calm," then leave. 3. Do not engage the woman in white. She may appear in multiple reflections. Avoid mirrors. 4. If the lullaby plays backwards, stay completely still until it stops. 5. The man in B13 will speak tonight. Do not reply. 6. Between 1:15 and 1:45 a.m., expect a code blue in room 203. There is no patient. Do not resuscitate. Karen was nowhere in sight. This time, I was alone. I punched in at 7 p.m. sharp. The hospital seemed quieter than before, but somehow more alert, like it had noticed me. My skin prickled as I walked the halls. My shoes echoed louder on the tiles. The lights above buzzed a little angrier. The patients were still there, mostly sedated, mostly silent. All except one, Mr. Gaines. He was wide awake when I entered room 203. His eyes were bloodshot. He was sweating, even though the room was cold. "She's angry," he whispered. "You brought her back." "I don't know what you mean," I said, checking his vitals. "She followed you," he said. "She knows your name now." At 10:40 p.m., I passed room 209 again. This time, the door was slightly ajar. A knock came from the other side. A rhythmic, almost polite knock, 3 short taps. I stood frozen, then remembered the rule. All is calm, I whispered. The knocking stopped. I turned and walked away, not daring to look back. At midnight, I retrieved the tray for B13. It was heavier than last night, and the contents smelled worse, like raw meat soaked in vinegar. I held my breath as I descended into the basement. The door to B13 was already open an inch. I didn't touch it, just slid the tray through the opening and waited. The voice came after a pause. It was deep, wet, and full of something ancient. Do you hear her singing? I didn't reply. Do you see her yet? Still, I said nothing. I see her standing beside you. A chill surged through me. I turned instinctively and saw a flash of white dress in the corner of my eye. I ran up the stairs, heart thundering, and slammed the basement door behind me. At 1:22 a.m., the hospital PA system crackled to life. Code blue, room 203. Code blue, room 203. I checked the patient list again. Room 203 belonged to Mr. Gaines, but I had just seen him alive. I grabbed my bag and bolted toward the room despite what the rules said. But when I got there, the bed was empty, sheets rumpled, monitor off. No sign of Mr. Gaines anywhere. The hallway lights flickered once. Then again, and then the lullaby began, but this time it was reversed. Playing backward like an old vinyl dragged the wrong way. It made my teeth ache just hearing it. I remembered the rule. Stay completely still. So I did. I stood in the middle of the hall, motionless, while the music played on, echoing around me. A shadow passed across the wall beside me, tall, slender, with hair that floated like it was underwater. I didn't move, didn't even blink. The music finally stopped after what felt like an hour. Only then did I breathe again. At 2:50 a.m., I sat at the nurse's station, nerves fried, staring into the darkness. I turned away from every mirror I saw, even the ones on medical equipment. But then I made a mistake. I opened the medicine cabinet to grab a sedative, and the mirror on the inside caught my eye. She was there, the woman in white, standing directly behind me, her mouth impossibly wide, eyes sunk in black pits. Her hands were raised like she was about to touch me. I spun around, nothing. I slammed the cabinet and refused to look at my reflection again. At 3:33 a.m., the knock came. This time, it was followed by a whisper. Marla. It was my mother's voice. I nearly answered. But something deep inside me, some instinct older than reason, told me to stay quiet. I covered my ears and walked away. At 4:10 a.m., I heard something new, weeping. It came from room 209. Soft sobs muffled behind the door. Help me, a voice pleaded, a child's voice. I kept walking. The sun finally began to rise at 6 a.m., faint golden light creeping through the dusty windows. I gathered the mirrors, one by one, using gloves so I didn't have to touch the glass directly. One of them cracked in my hand. A spiderweb fracture spread across the surface, and through it I saw something I'll never forget. 100 pale faces, all twisted in agony, screaming silently from the other side of the mirror. I shoved it into the cart and wheeled them back to the supply closet. At 6:59 a.m., I swiped out. Karen was waiting outside, smoking a cigarette. You look pale, she said. I saw her. She nodded slowly. You will again. She doesn't forget her favorites. I opened my mouth to ask what that meant, but she had already turned away. As I walked to my car, something scratched at my leg. I looked down and saw a long white thread wrapped around my ankle, like someone had tried to tie me to the hospital. I yanked it free and drove off, heart racing. But in the rearview mirror, I saw her again, smiling, closer than yesterday. Not smashing, burning. I didn't care what my landlord thought. Every reflection became a possible invitation. The woman in white didn't wait until night anymore. She haunted the glass at sunrise, lingered in dark windows, even rippled faintly across a puddle near my bathroom sink. I tried not to look. I taped newspapers over every reflective surface. Avoided screens, too. I tossed my phone in a drawer, pulled out an old Nokia, and pretended that would somehow keep me safe. It didn't. The third night began like the others. A message on the new phone at exactly 5:55 p.m. If you skip tonight, the next knock will come to your door. It wasn't signed. I didn't bother replying. I knew they meant it. By 6:20 p.m., I was already halfway back to Hollow Creek, heart pounding like it was trying to escape. My fingers trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. Every streetlight flickered as I passed. Every mile closer, the air felt heavier. Like driving into a storm no weather report would ever cover. The hospital rose out of the horizon like a waiting tomb. This time, I parked closer to the road, just in case I needed to run. I clocked in at 7 p.m. sharp. No Karen, no welcome, just another note waiting for me on the nurse's station desk. The paper was slightly damp, like someone had cried while writing it. Third night directives. Critical compliance required. 1. All previous rules still apply. 2. Do not speak aloud between 12 and 1 a.m. Silence is protection. 3. Room 209 is now unlocked. Do not open the door under any circumstance. If it opens on its own, run. 4. Room B13 will be missing at 2 a.m. This is expected. Do not search for it. 5. If you see your own double after 3 a.m., do not speak. Do not run. Let it pass. 6. Before dawn, return anything the hospital gives you. Refuse politely but firmly. This wasn't a job anymore. It was a survival test. I began my rounds in silence, flashlight in one hand, sedatives in the other. The hospital was even darker tonight. Like the building knew the sun had given up. Room 203 was empty again. No sign of Mr. Gaines. The bed was neatly made this time. And yet, the monitor still beeped. I unplugged it. The beeping continued. I left. At 10:32 p.m., I passed the break room and heard voices inside. Laughing, familiar voices. My old coworkers from my last hospital job. That couldn't be right. I opened the door and found the room empty. Lights off. Coffee machine cold. But the laughter continued behind me. At 11:45 p.m., I prepped the tray for B13 again. But I paused because something was wrong with the food. It was moving. Worms. Tiny, wriggling things squirming beneath the gravy. I gagged and turned away, but the tray was already gone. I hadn't even delivered it yet. The basement door stood open. A cold wind blew up from below. I locked the stairwell and marked it 7 p.m. By midnight, I was sitting at the nurse's station, lips pressed shut. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe loud. The hospital hummed with a low energy, like something ancient turning over in its sleep. I saw shadows moving down the hallway, figures that looked human, until they bent backward at the waist and crawled on all fours. They didn't speak, but they knew I was there. At 12:46 a.m., something brushed my shoulder. I didn't turn around. A cold hand pressed gently against my neck. I didn't move. By 1 a.m., it stopped. I exhaled for the first time in 40 minutes. Then I heard it. Room 209. Its door creaked open all on its own. A soft sigh escaped the room. It smelled like lilies and formaldehyde. I didn't look, didn't walk past it. I turned back and headed to the opposite end of the hospital. At exactly 2 a.m., I returned to the basement landing. B13 was gone. Not just empty. The hallway ended abruptly. Where the door had been, there was now solid brick. No scrape marks, no hinges, no sign it ever existed, but I could still hear something breathing on the other side. A man whispering my name, a baby crying, a woman laughing. I ran. At 2:45 a.m., I saw her again, the woman in white. She stood at the far end of the hallway, half lit by a flickering bulb. She didn't move, she didn't speak, but behind her was me, another me. Same scrub, same face, same terror in her eyes. Only she was smiling. She walked past the woman and down the hall. Our eyes met. She winked and then vanished around the corner. I didn't follow. At 3:30 a.m., the knock came again. But this time it wasn't at the emergency exit. It was at the front desk. A single, slow, heavy knock on the counter. I didn't move. A voice whispered, "She wants to help you now." I waited. At 4 a.m., I found something strange in the supply room while returning the hallway mirrors. A small, white box with a red ribbon. There was a tag. For Marla. Inside was an old photograph, black and white. It showed a group of nurses from the 1940s standing outside Hollow Creek Hospital. I was in the photo. Same face, same name embroidered on the tag. I dropped the box and ran back upstairs. At 5 a.m., I felt the hospital pulsing. Not shaking, pulsing like a heartbeat. With each pulse, lights dimmed, walls expanded slightly, then shrank again. Something was waking up beneath the floors. Or maybe it never slept. At 6:15 a.m., I sat outside the nurse's station, waiting to clock out. I didn't move, didn't blink. I held the rules in one hand and a rosary in the other. The moment the clock hit 7 a.m., I swiped out and sprinted for the door. Karen was standing outside, sipping her coffee. "You're changing," she said. "The hospital likes you." I don't care. You will. She handed me a mirror. I dropped it instantly. Inside the reflection, I saw nothing. No face, no me, just the hallway behind me, empty. I didn't sleep, not even a nap. After my third shift, I sat in the bathtub fully clothed, hands shaking, eyes locked on the wall, waiting for the mirrors to whisper again. They didn't, but the shadows moved. Every few hours, something would shift in the corners of my vision. A face in the wallpaper, a hand reaching from under the couch, the sound of my own voice calling me from another room. My apartment no longer felt like mine. I unplugged every appliance. I boarded up the bathroom mirror. I stuffed towels under the door and checked the peephole every 30 minutes. At 4:04 p.m., I got another message on the burner phone. Tonight is a test. She wants to know if you're ready. No sender, no number, just the warning. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, I knew the truth. I'd already made a mistake by returning. The hospital had seen me, and it had started to recognize me not as a visitor, but as one of its own. By 6:50 p.m., I was standing in the parking lot again, hands trembling as I reached for the badge clipped to my collar. The hospital didn't wait tonight. The doors slid open before I touched them. The air that rushed out wasn't cold. It was warm, welcoming, like the inside of a mouth. The punch clock had already registered me in. I hadn't even touched it. On the desk sat a leather-bound folder, heavier than the paper sheets before. Inside, a typed set of new instructions. Night 4 protocol, induction phase. 1. You are no longer a guest. You are part of the staff. 2. No more deliveries to room B13. The man has escaped. 3. If you hear footsteps behind you, keep walking. If they get closer, begin to hum. Do not turn around until they stop. 4. The woman in white will attempt contact tonight. You must not speak her name. 5. A new patient has been added to the system. Room 00. There is no room 00. 6. If a child appears and asks to be walked home, ask, "Where is your mother?" If they reply, "She's inside the walls," run. 7. You may begin to see versions of yourself in the patient beds. Do not acknowledge them. I ran my fingers over the folder's cover. It was warm to the touch. I began my rounds at 7:15 p.m. The lights dimmed behind me with every hallway I passed, like the building was swallowing my path. Every machine I checked beeped 2 seconds out of sync with the vitals. The halls had grown, wider, longer, like they were stretching to keep me in. I walked past room 209. The door was closed again. Scratches covered the wood, deep grooves, fingernail marks long and frantic. A single word was etched across the surface in ragged capital letters. Stay! I didn't linger. Room 203 was no longer on the floor plan, but I checked anyway. It was there. Inside, Mr. Gaines had returned. He lay perfectly still, eyes open, watching the ceiling. A slow drip of blood ran from his ear, staining the pillow. "Is she inside me now?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. He laughed. "She said your name last night, Marla. She likes the way it sounds." I left the room, heart pounding, skin crawling. By 11 p.m., I noticed the sound of footsteps behind me. Soft, barefoot. 1 step for every 2 I took. I picked up my pace. The steps quickened. I began to hum, low, off-key, shaking. The footsteps paused, then returned in perfect time with my heartbeat. I turned a corner. The lights were out. The air felt thick. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, wearing my scrubs, with my face. Her smile was twisted, stretched unnaturally wide. I turned off my flashlight. When I turned it back on, she was gone. At midnight, I was called to room 000. There should not have been a room 00, but the hallway had changed again. A door had appeared at the very end, tall, metal, covered in locks. The number burned into the surface. I didn't go in. Instead, I marked it on the paper and turned to leave. A soft knock followed, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Marla, it's your brother." My brother died when I was 17. I didn't turn around. At 1:17 a.m., a child stood at the end of the west wing, barefoot, pale, dressed in a hospital gown too big for him. He raised his hand and waved. "Can you walk me home?" I took a step forward, but stopped myself. The rule. "Where's your mother?" I asked. He looked up, eyes wide and glassy. "She's inside the walls." I ran. The child didn't chase me, but the walls groaned as I fled. Something inside them scratched, crawled, laughed. At 2:03 a.m., I returned to the nurse's station. Every patient chart had changed. Each one now listed the same diagnosis: reflected memory decay, final stage. The photos attached to each chart were no longer of the patients. They were of me. Me sleeping, me crying, me with blood dripping from my eyes. One photo was timestamped from 10 minutes ago. At 2:45 a.m., I passed the OR wing. All lights off. One surgical table occupied. A body under a white sheet. I don't know why I stopped, why I peeled back the cover. But I did. It was me. Mouth sewn shut, eyes missing. Hands clasped around a note that read, "Come home soon." I dropped the sheet and stumbled back. From the hallway came a soft tune, the lullaby. Only now it was being sung by the woman in white. Her voice was beautiful, terrible. I shoved cotton into my ears and fled to the janitor's closet. I stayed there until the song stopped. At 3:30 a.m., the power cut completely. The hospital lights died. The machines went silent. Only the emergency exit signs remained, glowing a sickly red. Then came the whisper, directly into my ear. "Welcome home, Nurse Marla." At 4:15 a.m., I found a new chart on the desk. My name was printed at the top. Patient 1. Diagnosis, partial reflection merge. Condition, stabilizing. Treatment, full integration. Taped below it was a photograph of me standing at the front desk, smiling, behind the desk, with the other nurses. All of them were in white. All of them were me. At 6:59 a.m., I ran to the punch clock. It wasn't working. The screen simply flashed, "Staff locked in, shift extended." I turned to run, but Karen was waiting in the lobby. "You're doing well," she said. "Let me go," I whispered. "You're part of the hospital now," she replied. "You were chosen. She chose you." I tried to run past her. She didn't stop me. But as I exited, the automatic doors closed, fast. One caught my wrist. Hard, blood smeared across the glass. The doors reopened a second later as if nothing had happened. I drove home, but the parking lot was empty when I arrived. My apartment key didn't fit the lock. Someone else lived there now. And in their window, a woman in white watched me, smiling. I slept in my car outside an abandoned gas station 30 miles away. The hospital wouldn't let me go home. The key no longer fit my lock. My neighbors didn't recognize me. And the woman now living in my apartment claimed she'd been there for years, had mail to prove it. Even my ID had changed. My name was now Marla W. Hollow, issued by Hollow Creek County Medical Board. There is no Hollow Creek County in Texas. The woman in white had erased me, and yet I kept coming back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Every night I stayed away, the hospital reached further. The mirror in the gas station bathroom had cracks shaped like my face. My own reflection mouthed words I hadn't spoken. My breath fogged glass, even when it wasn't cold. When I awoke around 4 p.m., the word home was carved into my rearview mirror. At 6:30 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't want to answer, but my hand moved on its own. "Clock in," a voice said. "Tonight is the crossing." Click. The call ended. This time I arrived early, not by choice. The hospital gates had been removed. There was no wind, no rust, no flickering lights, just stillness. The lot was full of identical cars, all the same make and color as mine, each with a nurse's badge left on the dash. I walked past them and up the stairs. The front doors opened without a sound. The lobby had changed, now twice the size, warmer, brighter, more alive. A fresh clipboard sat at the desk. Final phase, integration ritual. 1. Do not clock in. Time has no meaning tonight. 2. The hospital will begin speaking. You must answer only in thought. 3. You will be asked to sign a consent form. Refuse once, agree on the second ask. 4. Room 209 will open. Enter when called. 5. You may be offered your life back. This is a trick. Decline. 6. If the woman in white offers her hand, take it. But only if she has no shadow. This wasn't a job anymore. It was a devotion. I took the clipboard and started walking. Every hallway was glowing. The walls pulsed. The floor shimmered like skin beneath a thin layer of light. Patients no longer slept. They stood beside their beds, staring, unblinking, mouths moving soundlessly. Each of them had my face now. Each one whispered my name in unison as I passed. I kept walking. At 9 p.m., the hospital spoke. Not through speakers, through the walls, through the air, through my spine. "Do you belong to me?" I didn't answer out loud. In my mind, I said, "Not yet." The lights flickered. The floor beneath me vibrated gently, like a pleased sigh. At 10:10 p.m., I found a clipboard hanging on a door labeled Administration. On it was a consent form. my name at the top. Voluntary Staff Permanence Agreement. Subject, Marla W. Hollow. I acknowledge my role in the care and feeding of Hollow Creek Hospital. I consent to be mirrored, split, duplicated, and rewound. I understand I will exist in all rooms at all times. I agree to cease being human at sunrise. At the bottom was a black pen. My hand reached for it. But I remembered the rule. Refuse once. I decline, I whispered. The form vanished, but another appeared instantly in its place. Same wording. This time I signed. The door opened. Room 209 was waiting. Inside was an operating table and hundreds of mirrors lining the walls. Everyone reflected a different version of me. Some were smiling, some crying, some screaming. One was dead. At the far end of the room stood the woman in white. She had no eyes, just black pits that shimmered like wells of ink. Her hair floated, weightless. Her hands were folded over her chest. She stepped forward and raised one palm. No shadow. I took her hand. It was cold. And then the mirrors shattered all at once. A rush of sound filled the room. Every scream I'd swallowed, every cry I'd ignored, every rule I'd followed echoing at once. The mirrors didn't fall to the ground. They flew upward like the room was reversed, like I had become the reflection. The lights went out and I woke up, back at the nurse's station. But now I was the only one there. The hospital was silent, still. All charts gone, all signs of patients erased, except one. Patient file, Marla Ditas integrated. I stood. My reflection stared back at me from the blackened window. She didn't move when I did. She smiled first. At 3:33 a.m., the knock came. But not from the emergency exit. From inside my own chest. 3 soft pulses. Knock, 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 knock. The hospital had entered me, or I had entered it. What's the difference? At 4 a.m., I walked the halls. Every door bore my name now. The walls whispered my lullaby. The woman in white stood at every corner. She was me. I was her. At 6 a.m., I found the final message etched into the staff break room window. There is no sunrise here. And they were right. It never came. I've been inside the hospital for 3 days now, or maybe 3 years. Time doesn't pass in Hollow Creek like it does out there. There's no sunrise, no clocks that tick, no shift changes. The calendar on the wall in the nurse's station has every date marked the same. Permanent staff. I'm not allowed to leave anymore. Not really. Last night, I tried. I followed the hallway all the way to the front doors. They opened like always. I stepped outside and walked to the parking lot. My car was still there, same as always. But when I got in, the dashboard was filled with patient vitals. The radio was broadcasting heartbeats. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, the hospital stood behind me, not shrinking in the distance, but getting closer. No matter how fast I drove, the building was always just 20 feet behind me. After what felt like hours, I realized I had never left the parking lot. I stepped out and walked toward the road, but the street never came. The entire town had collapsed into shadows. The world beyond Hollow Creek was a flat gray void. I returned. I always return. And now she speaks to me, not the hospital. Her, the woman in white. I used to fear her. Now I understand. She isn't a ghost or a demon. She is the spirit of this place, its guardian, its jailer, its heart. She doesn't protect the hospital from us. She protects us from it. She comes to me now in every reflection, guiding, shaping, preparing me. I see her in my coffee, in the polished metal of surgical tools, in the fog of a patient's breathing mask. She tells me what to do, and I do it. Tonight, she told me it's time for my rounds, not as a nurse, but as her. I begin in the West Wing, room 203, where Mr. Gaines used to sleep. It's empty now, but not abandoned. The air is thick with memory. The walls are softer. I place my hand against the paint and feel a slow pulse beneath it. The hospital is alive. It breathes with me now. I find a new patient file waiting on the desk. Patient name, Marla W. Hollow. Host, symptoms, deterioration of boundary between self and sight. Treatment, assimilation in progress. Projected outcome, multiplication. My face is no longer just mine. I see it in the patients, in the staff, even in the shadows that crawl beneath the floor tiles. The hospital is using me as its blueprint. At 2:22 a.m., I walk past room 0. It is no longer locked. Inside are hundreds of beds, and each one is filled with someone who used to be me. Versions from timelines where I turned back, where I refused to sign, where I screamed instead of obeyed, where I ran when I should have stayed. Now they're all here, silent, still, watching. I don't stay long. At 3 a.m., the lullaby begins again, but this time I sing it, not from my mouth, from my chest. The air around me trembles. Doors open, lights flicker in rhythmic pulses. It's working. From outside, from the edges of town, from wherever the hospital's hunger reaches, other nurses, other caretakers, other Marlas, they'll be here soon. By 3:33 a.m., I arrive at the emergency exit. It opens before I knock. She is there, the woman in white, but tonight she kneels, and I understand. I've become her. This place needs a warden, a voice, a mirror to speak through, and I've been shaped for it. Every rule, every night, every shadow I refuse to follow. It all brought me here. Now I make the rules, and here they are. 1. You will enter Hollow Creek with a purpose, but you won't leave with one. 2. Your name will be remembered, but only by your reflection. 3. There are no clocks here, only repetition. 4. Room 209 is open for new staff. Do not knock. The door opens itself. 5. The woman in white is your guide, but never your friend. If you see Marla, it's already too late. They're coming. New staff, new faces, more like me. Soon the hospital won't need walls. It will be everywhere. In the corners of your vision. In that flicker behind the mirror. In the voice that calls your name at 3:33 a.m., don't answer. Don't turn around. And whatever you do, don't break the rules. Because now I enforce them forever. There is no sunrise here, and never will be again.